Merry Christmas, and welcome to the Once Again podcast. We are your hosts, Ashley and Jason. In this episode, we'll be looking at the 2022 TV miniseries, The Santa Clauses. In this series, we won't be doing a deep analysis or giving a bunch of behind-the-scenes facts, but giving our impressions of the series and giving it a score. I guess we'll also be talking about the songs a little bit, but not really. Not like we do in our normal series.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
I don't even remember them.
Yeah. The only one I really remember is Last Christmas, because I just got done watching that episode. Yeah. So we also want to give you, the listeners, a spoiler warning. We'll be recapping the plot of the series, which some may consider spoilers. So if you don't want to know anything about it at all, turn this episode off now and come back later after watching it for yourself. With all that out of the way, Merry Christmas to all you listeners out there, and enjoy the exciting, I should say culmination of Tim Allen Month, because it's not exactly the conclusion, but it's the apex of it. The Santa Clauses is a Disney Plus original series set as a continuation of the Santa Claus film series. It premiered on November 16th, 2022, with its first 2 episodes available immediately. According to the streaming agitator Just Watch, The Santa Clauses was the 10th most streamed television series across all platforms in the United States during the week of November 14th, 2022 to November 20th, 2022. Rotten Tomatoes reported an approval of 59%, with the average rating of 5.5 out of 10, based on 17 critic reviews. The website critics' consensus read, "The Santa Clauses is a bit ho-ho-hum as a continuation of the holiday franchise, but it's hardly a lump of coal, thanks to Tim Allen's spirited return as Father Christmas, along with a dash of Yuletide nostalgia."
Honestly, that's the best description I could think of to, wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Spoilers of my opinion, but...
Well, we're going to get
there.
Yeah, we're going to get there quite soon. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned a score of 55 out of 100 based on 6 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. So the series premise is Scott Calvin is on the brink of his 65th birthday and realizes that he can't be Santa forever. He's starting to lose a step in his Santa duties, and more importantly, he's got a family who could benefit from a life in the normal world, especially his 2 kids who have grown up at the pole. He learns of a contract clause where he can be released from his duties as Santa if another man is willing to succeed him. With a lot of elves, children, and family to please, Scott sets out to find a suitable replacement Santa while preparing his family for a new adventure in life south of the pole.
Created by Jack Burdett, based on The Santa Claus by Leo Benvenuti and Steve Rednick. Series directors are Jason Weiner, listed as supervising director, Charles Randolph Wright, and Katie Locke O'Brien. Series writers are Jack Burdett, Katie Colleton, Katie O'Brien, Kevin Hench, Ari Berkowitz, Allison Bennett, Eugene Garcia Cross, Haley Frazier, and Emily Burdett. Executive producer Jack Burdett, Tim Allen, Jason Weiner, John Radler, Rick Messina, Richard Baker, and Kevin Hench. Cinematography by J.P. Wakayama. Edited by R.J. O'Neill, Christine Kim, and Dean Pollack. Music by Ariel Reichshade. Production companies are Double Wide Productions, Small Dog Picture Company, and 20th Century Television. Distributed by Disney Platform Distribution. It stars Tim Allen as Scott Calvin, Santa Claus, Elizabeth Mitchell as Carol Calvin and Mrs. Claus, Austin Kane as Buddy Cal Calvin Claus, Elizabeth Allen Dick as Sandra Calvin Claus, Matilda Lawler as Betty, Devin Bright as Noel, Rupali Red as Grace Choksey, Cal Penn as Simon Choksey, Santa Claus.
All right, very nice. So we're going to dive into the episodes now. I guess I should let the listeners know that unfortunately I didn't get through all of them in the allotted time. I had a busy week going up to this, but...
Yes, it was finals week,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's fine. I did watch all 6, and we decided we're just going to go ahead and talk about all 6, and I will surprise Jason and get his reaction as we're going to the stuff that happens later.
All right, sounds good to me. So, let's start off with the first episode, Chapter 1, Good to Ho. It premiered November 16th, 2022. And the synopsis is, after stopping at one of his favorite houses on Santa's delivery list, Scott Calvin realizes that the 28 years he's been on the job has flown by. To make matters worse, his magic begins to falter. Scott trains to get his Santa mojo back, but the following Christmas, things only get worse.
So it's really this episode. Do we want to go scene by scene or just talk about it?
No, we don't have to go. We could just talk about it.
I thought this episode was very good, mostly because I think this is probably like the peak of the series almost, just for the nostalgia factor.
Agreed.
Like, we got to see him go to that little girl's house again, and that was great.
And she's all grown up now.
Yeah, and she's all grown up and, like, freaks out, and he's like, what do you mean you forgot about me? How could you forget about me? That was a great interaction. And she's like, dude, I'm an adult. Of course I don't believe in Santa.
Yeah. It's interesting, because they set up that, like, I forget if this is episode 1 or episode 2, but it's very early on that they set up that, what's his name? Simon's Company. What was it? There was like 17% of people providing gifts. It was listed as other. Like, he had a breakdown.
And he was like, what the hell is other?
He was like, what's the other? And like, it's Scott.
It's Santa.
It's Santa. Yeah. Like, and like, but like, on Scott's perspective, every year the amount of toys that he's delivering is getting smaller and smaller because less people believe and people grow up and everything like that. So
we're living in a digital world.
Yeah,
people can get things very quickly now. So like
everything now,
which is definitely an important part of later episodes. I think.
Yeah, and but yeah, the little girl was played by Casey Wilson here, who was a Saturday Night alum, and she was one of my favorites when she was on Saturday Night Live, and she's a actress, and she was on a very good TV show that I can't think of the name of now, but it was a modern day version of Friends, but actually funny, and it was on ABC. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was a good show, and it was nice to see her here. Of course they made a joke about millennials living with their parents, but it was still fine.
I'll accept it.
Yeah.
As a millennial living with her parents.
Yeah, as a millennial.
Times are tough, guys.
Yeah, as a millennial who only has his own house thanks to his parents, I have no room to judge. But you're right, times are tough. But yeah, it was a good setup for the episode. I don't really remember all the details in order of how they happen, but we talked about less people are believing, and Simon gets set up in it in the first episode, which I wasn't expecting. And the episode ends with Scott falling off a roof.
Oh yeah, which is wild, and you don't know if he's alive. If things are gonna. I mean, you kind of know he's alive. There's gonna be more episodes. So
and he has he has an elf friend that's delivering things with him too, which I think is a subtle way of showing the audience how he's losing his Santa.
Yeah, that he has like extra person with him.
Yeah, but yeah, it was a shock. Like you said, you knew he's going to be fine because there's going to be more episodes, but he fell off the roof, and it was just like a big callback.
We're living that first movie like. Oh.
Yeah.
Still off the roof, guys.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say about episode 1? Or?
No, I think episode 1 did have one of those musical scenes, I think, right?
Yes. It also, I forgot to mention, it did set up that Carol kind of doesn't really remember her life beforehand.
Also she's, like, trying to find out more about Mrs. Claus. That also is, like, a subplot of her being like...
But there's a scene...
What happened to the other Mrs. Claus? And you know what? Good freaking question, guys.
But there's a scene where she's talking with their daughter and she doesn't even remember what her name was.
Yeah, it takes her a second.
Yeah.
Because her identity has become Mrs. Claus.
Mm-hmm. Over the past 20-some years or whatever.
But yeah, it did have one of those musical scenes, and I'm not going to talk about all of them because, to be honest, I don't really remember them because they were just bad, and I didn't really understand what they were doing with the music, like the weird music sections, because
they felt out of place.
Yeah, there's I think there's 3 of them because I think there's one in the last episode too.
I know there's one in episode 3.
Yeah, there's one in episode 3, and then I think there's one in episode 6 too. So there's enough of them that's it's weird, and I'd respect it if that was something that had been in the movies, that we were just honoring that, but it wasn't in any of the movies. I don't know where that's coming from.
Martin Short does do that New York ripoff, but sings North Pole, North Pole. But that's also, it's Martin Short. So
and I also think it fits with that movie, but I don't think it fits with, the series overall, which is why it's very odd.
It's about how he's commercialized the North Pole and everything like that, and he's show-off Santa.
Yeah, this felt more like we were trying to go for, Glee, and this isn't a Glee thing, so I don't know what we were going for.
That is 100% what it was. It was a Glee thing.
We were going for a weird Glee, episodes, and I don't know why we were doing that. No reason.
take those sections out.
So let's move on to Chapter 2, the Successus Clause.
Which is annoying as hell to say.
Yeah, and I forget what the joke that they made in it. What did he... he said, like, the Seuss Clause or something. He was like, what the hell in the name of Dr. Seuss does that mean? But yeah, and the synopsis is that Scott learns that by the way of the Successus Clause, which is evidently Latin according to the show, so I'll give them credit and say that it was Latin, he can retire, but he must find a worthy successor before doing so. Torn between wanting to retire and not wanting to leave the North Pole, Scott taps his children as possible candidates. He quickly realizes none of them are interested in the role, but instead want to know more about the world outside the North Pole. So, I think interesting, the thing that stood out to me about this episode was we get to see Charlie again.
That was nice.
Yeah, and it was a good way to wrap it up real quick because, like,
obviously, if we hadn't addressed it, we would have all been like, but what about Charlie? Charlie wanted to be Santa.
But even in our episode covering the Escape Clause movie, we talked about possibilities about, like how you said, Charlie wanted to be Santa, and right here they were like, nope, Charlie's got his own family.
His own life.
Yeah, he's not interested in it, which... They lie to his wife about who Scott is.
I know, they tell him that he's like a fisherman, like in the North Pole or like in Antarctica. Like, okay.
What is this BS?
Iceland,
yeah. See, like, why does Neil get to know, but Charlie's wife?
Yeah, Neil's kid gets to know, but like Charlie's wife and his grandkids don't know.
No.
Odd.
Yeah, and
odd choice.
It's interesting. It's weird too that.
And Charlie's response is, "I don't know. I didn't have a good time to tell her." Like.
Yeah.
That you tell her before you get married.
Yeah. By the way, my dad's Santa Claus.
By the way, we have to go up to the North Pole. My dad's Santa.
Yeah.
I know. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I know
Don't pass out. It's okay.
I know it's going to sound crazy. I'm also friends with the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy, or the Molinator, he likes to be called.
I'm just going to say that. The fact that none of those people are in this freaking series at any point. They're not. That's a spoiler, no. I know for you.
Not even Alicia Tyler? Like
They're not there.
Mother Nature? That's disappointing.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen them.
Now you understand why there's things about this series that make me like, we did so well, and then... Well, I know I already told you there's no Jack Frost anywhere either, which is such an odd, like...
Well, that's why they greenlit Season 2 already, because we found out, according to Deadline.com, Season 2 has already been greenlit, so...
No.
And I should mention that the episode 2 also premiered on November 16th, 2022, because I know when I'm editing this later, it's going to bug me that I didn't say the premiere date for it, but it premiered alongside the first episode. Let's see, what else did happen in this episode?
We're slowly finding out that the kids have powers, too.
Oh, yes, that's true, yeah.
Sandra can talk to animals, and Cal can see, like, has, like, Santa dreams, and can see some weird shit, like...
Yeah.
He's got his own weird Christmas stuff going on.
It's funny, too. I don't remember if it's this episode or episode 3, but... Oh, what is her name? The one elf that's married to Noel. Which is... His name is Noel. Like, they keep calling him Noel, but it's Noel. Like, that's something, too, is that all the elves have Christmas-themed names in this.
Yeah.
Or, like, you know, weird names, like Cookie and stuff like that.
And then there's Betty.
But, yeah, there's Betty. But, like, in the previous movies, we had Curtis...
And Bernard.
And Bernard. Like, we had normal names, like, for the elves.
And Judy.
Judy, yeah. I don't know why we have to have all these weird named elves in this. That's a nitpick that I have about this. But I'm just going to say it now. But yeah, I love how she says, we conducted a study to find out that the children of Santa Claus, grow up to be very strange. And they were like, oh, how many children of Santa Claus have there been? Including your two? Yeah. 2. I cracked up at it. It made me laugh. Which a lot of the humor in it is really bad
there's
puns.
There's a reason for that. But, we'll get there.
Yeah. And then I have 2 pieces of trivia for episode 2. The series depicts drones delivering as a faulty... Oh, that's right, because Simon has his drone system that he reveals. He has his everywhere or everything now system. And I think it's a technology we're probably going to have one of these days, but the drone...
I mean, you do have drones that can deliver stuff already. It's not, like, quick or anything, but it can happen. Yeah. But it's in, like, major cities like LA.
He said we'd have to build a facility every 100 miles or something like that to have it work how we want it to. But anyway, the series depicts drone delivery as a faulty system. This is ironic as giant companies in real life, such as Amazon, have started using this technology with mild success. And then the other trivia note... Oh, this one was interesting. Actually, no, this wasn't the one that I thought of, but this is interesting anyway. This episode slightly addresses why elves did not question Scott Calvin suddenly replacing the previous Santa, and why there was not a Mrs. Claus. The elves view every incarnation as one entity. Tim Allen himself indicated this, as he too did not understand those plot holes. So they just view him as Santa Claus, no matter who actually is Santa Claus.
And there's reasons for that, and you did not get to those episodes. So
No, I just want to find that trivia note. I have it. Oh, in episode 2, the 10,228 days on the board is 28 years since the incident in the 1994 movie.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I like that they figured that out. Because at one point,
Beautiful.
yeah, they write down like since accidents and they erase it.
Yeah.
Right. But because Scott fell.
Yeah.
He's okay, but he fell. All right, let's.
Oh, and that's because they all freaked out that he fell. Like it was like DEFCON 7 in the thing. Like he fell off the roof, and you're right. Like. But none of these people were upset the same way when he came back in the first movie and with Santa. Like, it's like they just blank face. Yeah. Everybody was good.
Yeah, you're right. We move on to episode 3 called Chapter 3, Into the Wobbly Wood. And it premiered November 23rd, 2022. Scott interviews potential Santa Claus candidates, which I cracked up at the one, and we'll talk about it in a moment, while the family gets ready to leave. Simon Chosky, or is it Chosky? Chosky. One of the candidates brings his daughter Grace with him to the North Pole. During Simon's interview, Sandra and Grace go missing. In finding their daughters together, Scott realizes Simon is the best choice to take the coat. So, I think I want to talk about it immediately. The Peyton Manning cameo.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I cracked up at it. Peyton Manning's one of the people that Scott's interviewing to take over as Santa, and if he says to him, he's like, "Come on, like you're better. You'd be better at this than Brady would be, or something along those lines." Like,
oh, it's so good.
Yeah. It cracked me up though, and Peyton Manning signs one of the elves' shirts, and the elf is like, "Michelangelo gave me this," and he's like, "It's worth more now, trust me."
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah.
It's Noel's shirt, actually. Yeah. It's an odd scene, but I love it.
Yeah, they're getting set to go back to Chicago and live there.
Yeah, and Sandra's a little upset about it because she isn't comfortable by the idea of living with like actual humans again, like living with humans, because these kids have never seen humans really. Yeah,
well, that's Cal. Like, they find out I think it was in the previous episode, but they find out the video game that he's playing is just like a daily life simulator. Like he has to go to the DMV and stuff like that because he knows nothing about.
Because they've both been trying to figure out stuff about, like, Sandra goes and like shakes the snow globes to watch Christmas memories because she wants to see like what humans do. So like they're both a little like they're excited but also scared because they're going to a completely like new thing.
Yeah. And they have Simon there, who's not allowed to take pictures, but just keeps taking those pictures on his phone. Like, why wouldn't they take his phone away from him? But he's waiting to interview with Scott, and Cal's like, "Oh, let me show your daughter around." And then Sandra comes around, and she's like, "No, you don't know the factory like I do. Let me show her the factory." She takes the daughter off, and they go into the woods, and they meet
La Befana,
the Christmas witch, which I guess she's an older Italian version of Santa Claus. Yeah,
just one of the versions of the Santa Claus myth, as it is.
And then when Scott and Simon find out about it, they have to... Well, first, Scott's like, Simon sucks. He's not going to be good for this job. And then they go into the woods to find their daughters, and as he's getting to know them more by talking to them when they're walking around the woods, he's like, maybe...
And Simon does seem like he's, like, a good fit for the job, to be honest, like, at first.
Yeah. Which Simon reveals to Scott that his wife passed away 2 years ago. And then in, like, the end of the episode, Scott talks to Carol and says to her, like, "Oh, let him find out about the Mrs. Claus, like, later on." Like, I was like, Scott, like, you gotta, like, you had to get married within 4 years of being Santa? You gotta let this widower know that he's gotta get married. But, whatever. It is what it is. Do you want to talk about La Befana at all, or...
No, I thought she was interesting. Like, not like a scary witch or anything, just an interesting, like...
Well, she even says, like, she's like, "Oh, one witch eats one child one time, and all witches are labeled as children eaters," or whatever she said. And then this is another episode that has a musical number to it, because Scott says, "Oh, Simon's going to replace me," and he tries to give him the coat, but the coat runs away, as you were saying.
Yeah, the coat is not thrilled by this idea.
Yeah. And then the elves perform a version of Last Christmas by Wham.
We also need to talk about the orb that, like, because we didn't mention it so far, the Christmas orb that gauges the level of Christmas spirit.
Yeah, there's a black void showing up in it more and more, and Scott thinks that's because his powers are failing him and everything. But the end of this episode, it just kind of gets huge. Like, it's shown it has nothing to do with Scott, because Scott and his family go back to Chicago. They wake up, and I did like how Scott's kids didn't recognize him.
Oh, that was hilarious.
I was just like, that's also well done, because they wouldn't, like, their whole lives, he's been
Fat Santa.
Yeah, Fat Santa with a big white beard and white hair, and now he's skinny Tim Allen with gray hair and no beard. So I did like how they didn't recognize him. And then there's some trivia on this. Edie explains that the reindeer believing themselves could fly is based on the theory that bees should not be able to fly, and do so because they believe they can. This misconception was started by French... Oh, God.
Aeronautical engineer.
Thank you.
August Megan, who ignorantly did not realize that bees and airplanes do not function the same way.
Thank you very much. But yeah, they explain that the reindeer fly because they believe that they can fly. And a bit of innuendo is shown during the performance of Last Christmas, when each elf held a letter that spelled out, "We love you, Santa." However, for a brief moment, the word Santa was misspelled as Satan, causing the elves to scream upon realizing their mistake.
It's too funny.
Alright, and this is the part where Jason leaves off, because...
and Ashley is here to probably break all of Jason's conceptions of what's about to happen.
Should I say what I think was... Because we talked about it in the car, too, but...
You could go with what you think, and then we'll...
Alright, so I thought that there was going to be some sort of evil elf or something that was causing this all to happen.
He thinks Betty's the evil elf.
I do think Betty's
Betty.
Yeah. Or, well, she was really pushing to get Scott to retire. I don't know. I thought there was something going on, but we'll find out very shortly, because I'm still going to read the synopsises, and Ashley will talk about it. And we move on to Chapter 4, The Shoes Off the Bed Clause, and it premiered November 30th, 2022. And Scott adjusts to life in Chicago, unsure what his identity is now that he is not Santa. Meanwhile, Simon settles in at the North Pole. He learns he can use Santa's delivery system year-round for his e-commerce company, but in doing so, he further diminishes the Christmas spirit. Scott and the family get ready to spend their first Christmas together, but before they can, Scott is met by an unexpected visitor. Oh, I think I might know who that is. Is it Bernard?
It is Bernard,
yes.
but we don't know that until the 5th episode. The 4th episode ends with him turning around to see who it is. But It is Bernard.
All right, excellent.
So I'm going to start off by talking about what the family's up to, because I think the Chicago stuff is kind of interesting. So they're back in Chicago, they're adjusting life. Carol is right back in it as principal, vice principal, living her best life, being friends, and Scott's kind of having a hard time adjusting just to not being the man in charge. This is her story now. She's doing everything. The kids are having a hard time adjusting a little bit. They're playing a lot of board games around the house, trying to play board games, have family time. Cal meets a girl and has a little girlfriend going on.
Oh. She likes that he's weird and everything? Or, yeah.
A little bit.
Okay.
She does find out later that he's Santa's son, and she's chill with it.
So
that's
she
cool.
Gets to know the
she
secret, but not Charlie's wife or children.
AKA Charlie's just lazy and doesn't want to deal with sounding crazy.
Yeah, I guess.
He's got Neil syndrome bad.
Listen,
right now.
I can understand. All right, I can understand hiding it from her. You get married, okay? But after your first kid is born and you're locked in, it's this person's tied to me forever now. You tell them, you're all right. So listen, I held something really big from you for a long time.
Also,
but my dad's Santa Claus.
I'm just saying.
Someday I might be Santa Claus.
I'm saying, if somebody's I'm gonna take you to the North Pole, we're gonna go see Santa Claus, I would think I'm crazy, but also be this is the greatest information you have ever given me. Magic is real. Santa is real. And you're his... Oh my god. I'd lose my shit and be so excited, though. That's basically what's going on with the kids and what's going on with the Chicago stuff. Okay. And then the stuff going on in the North Pole is... So Simon has decided that he can use the magic of Christmas, basically, to like warp his drones to where they need to be immediately so that he can run the system from one main location and that it'll work. And he's calling it Christmas every day. I don't remember if that starts in this episode or a later episode, but like it's one of those where the Christmas spirit is diminishing because now we're like really commercializing everything.
Yeah.
Like Christmas doesn't matter. There's nothing special about it anymore. And all the elves are trying to tell him like Christmas is a special thing, like you can't make it every day, otherwise it's not special anymore. And I think it starts in this episode, but because the Christmas spirit is depleting, the elves start disappearing.
Oh.
And then if they stop believing, they like literally poof right into like sparks and gone. Like if they give up themselves, like even, I know it's not this episode, but Betty even like,
oh,
that's why I'm like, Betty is not a bad person. Betty is good. It's literally it comes down to Simon basically like ruining everything.
Okay. All
with commercialization.
Yeah.
That's the moral of this.
And he's still thinking small, like, or he's not thinking of the Santa idea.
He's not thinking of Santa as what we'll come to find out is Santa is about giving. But giving, in the name of giving, not like because you want people to get what you want. Like he's so caught up in things that he's not even hanging out with Grace anymore. Like Grace is trying to have like Christmas spend time with him. And he's like, no, I got to do this. Dad's got to do this. Like, he's so caught up in these emotions of, like, wanting to do well and do it because, he's failed at so many things at this point that he's trying to do better in his life for Grace's sake, but he's also failing at it because he's trying too hard, if that makes sense.
It is interesting that Scott in the first movie was given a year to get his life in order from, like, when he first put on, like, he was from the first Christmas that he put the coat on to the next Christmas. And like you saw, like he had trouble at work and everything like that. But do they do the same thing with Simon here, or is it just supposed to be...
No, he's just at the North Pole.
Got to be right at...
I think they want to help him, but he's like too already like, this is how I'm going to change things and do things, and they're like, this isn't how Christmas works.
Well, I have a bit of trivia here, if that's all right.
Go right ahead.
So Scott Calvin notices a boy holding a Grogu doll and mentions Buzz Lightyear, the latter being a running gag that Tim Allen mentions in most film and television appearances, along with referencing Santa Claus, which I have seen him do. I remember in that Last Man Standing episode, they wanted him to be Santa for something, and he was like, me as Santa? No one will ever believe that. Like, And then also, Crouton says, I don't feel so good before disappearing. And this is a reference to Avengers Infinity War. It was Spider-Man that said that. Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. And then poof, he also does.
Yes.
Anything else you want to talk about that episode, or should I move on to...
No.
Okay.
Oh, I do want to travel back a couple episodes. We did find out what happened to elves. ELFs, because they were in that first movie, and then we're in the later films. We found out that there was some cost cutting, and we got rid of them, and there's only one left, and he's kind of weird. That's it.
What did they say? They had a specific thing about... Like, they didn't say cost cutting. They said frost cutting. There was frost cutting, and the one elf, the ELF that was left, I love that they opened up the scene on him drinking the maple syrup out of the bottle, because it just looks like he's drinking liquor. And Scott says to him, I saw you drinking that maple syrup.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to that.
Okay. That's going to come up later?
It comes up a little bit, because he's helpful later. So this is kind of like the episode 5 coming up is kind of the episode where I'm like, okay, we are getting the lore. We are getting the things that, like, you want out of something like this if we're going to do this series.
Okay.
Go ahead with your synopsis.
So episode 5, Across the Yuleverse, it premiered December 7th, 2022, and Scott is taken to the Yuleverse, where he learns the truth about how he came to be Santa. Meanwhile, things at the North Pole get worse as more elves disappear, and Christmas spirit is all but destroyed. Scott returns from the Yuleverse with Noel and heads back to the North Pole to save Christmas. Before he can, he is quickly captured by Simon. Carol, Cal, and Sandra race back to the North Pole to help Scott. Oh no, Simon's turned evil? He's like the toy Claus, like the toy Santa Claus from...
Yeah, a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
So, I am going to read this first line up here.
Okay.
Scott is surprised by the appearance of Bernard, who left years ago of the North Pole and met and married Vanessa Redgrave and gave up his immortality.
Oh, who's Vanessa Redgrave?
Oh, just like an actress.
Oh, okay,
like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like he gave up immortality for an actress.
Let me look her up.
Okay. Yeah, that's the
Oh, okay, I know her. All right.
I was gonna say, I'm like, you definitely know her. She's been in things, so.
Oh, okay. All right. I think actually, let's see. This has what she's known for. Oh, yes, she played Guinevere in the Camelot movie musical that I saw. Okay, that's what I know her best from.
Yep. So she's a thing, and so that's like canon to this, which is funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, going like the most important part. How do I even explain this like lore? Oh my god! So they basically go back in time and talk to all the previous Santas, or like, but all the other Santas are actual ethereal like people. Scott and his family are the first humans to live at the North Pole. Scott is the first human Santa.
Oh, okay.
That's the like
that's
plot twist here. Is all these like immortal ethereal creatures decided they didn't want to do Santa anymore, and that the Christmas spirit was dying, and so the best way to deal with that was to give their powers to a human, and they chose Scott. So everything that happened in that first movie with the falling off the roof was planned.
That's interesting.
Because Santa had like an interaction with Scott when he was a kid, the same way Scott had an interaction with that little girl in the first film, and Scott was very much a giver and wanted to give, and when he asked Santa for what he wanted presents for his family members. He didn't ask for anything for himself. So Scott was chosen, and they were like, we were hoping that this would save Christmas because we hoped that like the magic would be passed through blood, that your kids would pick up powers, as we know they have. Scott says that they haven't because he doesn't know, but they have. And that them living at the North Pole, being born at the North Pole, would like change things, and they hoped that this would work for Christmas. But they also, all these clauses he had, these were things they were making up as they went, because they wanted him to get married. They wanted him to have kids. Like, this clause for him to get out was basically just like a thing they threw in to be like, in case this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because it might not work.
Well, the escape clause doesn't really make sense. Well, I guess maybe just to get him to choose to be Santa again, I guess, is like show him.
Yeah, so it's all part of this like thing. So, and then he comes back from his little Yuleverse crossover. La Befana was mad that she wasn't there because it was all men, like men Santa Clauses.
Okay.
So yeah, that's also why there's never been a Mrs. Claus before.
Oh.
There's literally never been a Mrs. Claus. Carol is the first one.
Okay.
But we also see that's why when they were leaving, they all wanted to like hug her and stuff, because they really appreciated her, because that was the first time the elves had a Mrs. Claus. Like, it's not that she lost her like personality; she is the Mrs. Claus.
Yeah.
So all that's happening. We kind of learn about some of the other Santas and what they had to deal with. And he comes back. Also, seeing Bernard is great. A little weird, but great. And then, they have to go back up, basically, and try and save Christmas.
Okay. And then I'll just talk about the trivia here. The title is possibly a nod to Marvel Comics' famous Spider-Verse story. This is the second time that Jim O'Heir played Santa, the first time being in an episode of Austin and Ally. It is also the second time that Mitch Polios has played Santa/St. Nicholas. The first time was in the 2022 television movie, The 12 Days of Christmas. I'm guessing that they're actors that play the different versions of Santa. And the Krampus is depicted stealing toys from children. In actual folklore, he kidnapped children who misbehave. This was changed most likely to make it more family-friendly. And then we move on to episode 6, or I should say chapter 6, A Christmas to Remember, and it premiered December 14th, 2022. The Calvins race against Simon to find the Santa coat in order to save Christmas. Simon realizes the error of his ways and steps aside to let Scott be Santa again. The elves return and everyone hustles to get this year's Christmas deliveries pulled off in time. Scott takes his family on the delivery run, then they return to retake their place as the first family of the North Pole.
Yep. So, they get back. It is kind of crazy. Sandra ends up talking to a horse to get a horse to fly them back.
Oh,
because like
the horse can believe that
it can fly.
Okay, that's cute.
Cal can see like the big hole where the drones are coming out of, so he knows how to warp back.
Okay,
because he has that kind of power. So
the kids are very helpful there. And Scott and Noelle, like, teleport back themselves via Bernard, so, like, they're already back. They're fine. They're trying to find the coat, who is with La Befana for a while, and then the coat leaves. And so La Befana's chasing it because she knows that she's like, the Calvins are back, like...
And she wants to be Santa, or does she just...
No, I think she just, like...
She's trying to help?
Yeah, she's trying to help, because, like, she's also kind of one of the Santas, but not... Carol ends up talking to her, and she was like, all the men Santas were there? I wasn't invited to the Santa Yuleverse thing. She's kind of mad. It was funny.
That's understandable. Yeah.
Girl power. You go, La Befana.
Yeah.
But, so they end up going back, and they take... The coat ends up being, of course there's a scene, the coat's sitting on the floor, and it's Simon and Scott, and they're running at it, trying to get to the coat, so you can get there first. And Simon does get it, and then Grace shows up, and she's, like, just talking, and, like, Scott ends up talking him down off the ledge, basically, with the coat, and is like, don't you just want your daughter to be happy? And Scott's like, what do you want? And Grace is like, Dad, are you the bad guy here? I think you're the bad guy. Like, and he's like, no, I'm not, it's them. Because, like, Simon's lost it at this point a little bit. But Scott ends up talking to Grace, like, what do you want? She's like, I just want my dad and, like, family time for Christmas. And Simon realizes, like, this is too much for him. So, everything's good.
And they get their memories wiped?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Scott takes the coat, and he goes on to live his better life,
Nothing, like, with his powers or anything? Like, they just come back, or...?
I think they come... Well, part of the issue is that people aren't believing, which I'll get to, because they have to deliver the presents now, but obviously no one's been making presents because half the elves are playing. So they go into the room with the snow globes, and they pack up every single snow globe. And that's the special gift they deliver to everyone. The snow globes that let you see your favorite Christmas memory. And they drop one off at every house, and everybody... And that's how they bring back the Christmas spirit.
Okay.
Is by letting people relive their favorite Christmas memories.
Okay. And they saved Christmas.
And they saved Christmas.
Right. And we have a bit of trivia here. The Clockwork Soldiers from the Santa Claus 2 make a return appearance.
They do. They're creepy.
Okay. Scott calls Carol Mrs. John Wick after seeing that she beat up the Clockwork Soldiers. I have to
Oh, yeah. This. She had a lot of pent-up anger because, she's still in that, like, but I'm more than just Mrs. Claus kind of thing. Even though she's, like, found out at this point, like, I'm the first Mrs. Claus.
Okay.
So.
And then the day this episode was released, the Santa Claus was renewed for a second season.
Yes, it was.
We're going to be getting a season 2 on this. Anything else you want to say, or should I go into these trivia notes, or...
I don't know. I feel like it's definitely... I'm trying to think if there's anything that's like... Bernard was only in that one episode, which...
Sad, but nice to see him.
Yeah. Nice to see him.
So, Scott's ex-wife and the other ones don't show up at all.
No, they don't. Like I said, they don't show up. Jack Frost doesn't show up, which you think, like... Doesn't even be really mentioned.
Yeah. Aisha Tyler as Mother Nature.
Yeah, none of the...
Obviously, Peter Boyle is passed away, so he can't be in it.
None of the council shows up. Like, I don't know.
I wonder if that's what they brought all the other Santas on for, like, to make up... Like, it expands the lore a little bit more.
Like I said, I think the lore is fascinating, and I think it, like, makes up... Like, especially because things get weird those first couple episodes, and you're like... I think knowing that lore is like, oh... You know what? All of this makes sense. Especially... when I saw that the episode was going to be like, you're going to figure out exactly why you were made a Santa Claus, I didn't know how that was going to play, because I'm like, no, the whole point of that first movie is, like, this accident happened. Like, I wasn't sure I was going to like the idea that, like, he was forced to be Santa, but now it makes so much more sense that they went this direction with it.
Do you remember, too, how we talked about one of the trivia notes for the first movie was that there were elves in the background, like, at Charlie's school, and, like, where Scott was, like, in the park
because
and stuff.
It was all a plan.
Yeah, they were watching him this whole... Like, cause, that makes sense. Kind of makes the elves a little darker,
though. But also, see, now it makes sense why they weren't, like, upset or losing their minds when Scott came back, because Scott was supposed to come back. Yeah. All this was supposed to happen. Like, they made it sound like, oh, this happens all the time.
That's what...
Almost, but like we're supposed to believe that, oh, this is just what happens to every Santa, but it's not.
Judy's cocoa is what did it. She drugged him with that cocoa and made him Santa.
Like it's all fine. Like it's interesting.
Well, it sounds good. I'm definitely going to check out the next 3 episodes.
I recommend it.
Yeah. I just want the one trivia note on here that I only want to point out is that Tim Allen's daughter, Elizabeth Allen Dick, plays one of Scott Calvin's children, Sandra Calvin, and this was also her first, her acting debut, I should say.
Which is cool.
Yeah. It kind of weirded me out a little bit to find out that Tim Allen, who's 70, has a 13-year-old daughter, but what are you going to
We'll try not to think about it.
Yeah.
Try not to think about it, guys.
Do you want to give it a score? I'm just going to say that from what I've seen so far, 6 out of 10.
I probably agree with that. I don't love it or hate it. It's pretty good. I think the musical thing is weird. Like, we're not watching Glee. Don't know why we're doing that every, like, other episode. That's too much. I like a lot of the nostalgia and that we're, like, picking up on things, but I don't think we quite hit the mark on things. Also, I feel like they really, like, played up the Bernard thing when, like, advertising this, and then he was, like, in one episode, like, kind of, but he, like, wasn't really there either.
It is kind of... I wonder... Just because we had discussed that, like, in, I think, the second movie, that the Tooth Fairy was a new Tooth Fairy, so I wonder if, like, the same thing's going on here. Like, I don't know. Well, we'll have to see. I wonder what season 2 is going to bring. Probably just...
I imagine because... So, I didn't mention this, so it ends there. You know, they had talked about how this would have been their first Christmas together. So they all go together to, like, drop off the snow globes. The whole family's in the sleigh, and they go. And the funny thing that happens is they go to the last house, and Scott's like, Cal, you could do this one. And it's Cal's girlfriend's house.
Oh, okay.
So she's sitting there, and she's like, what are you doing in my fireplace? Like, and then he's like, yeah, Dad's Santa. Yeah. I think he had already told her that, but I don't know if she, like, quite believed him. Okay. But, like, and she was into it. It's fine.
Well, with a season 2 happening, at least, Tim Allen month will live on.
Tim Allen month will live on.
Yeah, next December we'll have some more Tim Allen month for the audience out there.
I'm hoping we get maybe some Jack Frost. I mean, maybe not Martin Short, but, you know, some Jack Frost, at least reference. Like, would love that. Maybe some Mother Nature, like, get some more in there. I'm sure it'll be a lot about the kids learning to be Santa and, like, take up the mantle. Now that's kind of what we're looking at.
So, do the kids get fat or anything? Or they're just...
No.
Nah, shucks. I did like, I think it was season
That
2.
was really emotional, too, because obviously he has to put back on the coat. And, like, they're all sitting around, and he's like, you know, when I put this on, I'll be Santa again.
Yeah.
And, like, we'll be Santa family.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah.
So they gave up their normal lives. But, you know, this is what they're supposed to do, I guess. And
this is what the Council of Santas has decided.
Question, is Carol's hair back up in a bun at the end, or is it still down?
No. It's down.
Okay, so, all right, good, yeah. Because that was a big scene for her, that she got to let her hair down.
Thank God.
Yeah, but yeah.
She could be hot Mrs. Claus. We don't need dumpy Mrs. Claus.
Agreed. Nothing else to say. This has been the Once Again Podcast. Any questions, comments, or critiques can be addressed to our email at onceagainpod@gmail.com. Follow us on our social media accounts, Once Again Pod, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast, we have several tiers available on patreon.com/onceagainpod. As always, a like, follow, or share would be greatly appreciated. Thank you and have a wonderful day. And remember, we will entertain you. We will always entertain you. Merry Christmas. Oh. Rumpelstiltskin always says that magic comes with a price. But for this price, you can get a nice piece of jewelry. Use code ONCEPOD for 10% off your first order at Unusual Magic Jewelry on Etsy. Click the link in the description.